Yeah, it's kind of like it's already like daylight. Yeah, yeah, that happens like in any case. But I mean, as far as the lighting goes, it's going. I was going away. The way the light kind of comes through with the lighting effects with the lasers and a 3D animation, and sometimes when the daylight comes in there, it kind of presents a kind of like a reflection, um, other than the lighting itself from outside light. But anyway, yeah, I was kind of thinking about the certain factors. And really, I don't want to focus all the time about the Stargate program, but it seems that my motivation, for YouTube is obviously originally, me being a drummer and a singer. But the thing is that it seems that really something about using other bands. I'm probably well beyond 200 bands and singers, and more than 3,000 individual songs, or that many bands, that many songs. The thing is that when it's like actually doing it and started to do it on YouTube, predominantly my first time really with my Pearl Vision Strider Red with black hardware, and that's probably about maybe close to maybe 5 years now. Maybe I'll have to actually think about it. 2024. Huh. Hmm. Uh, yeah. So in any case, yeah. So it seemed to be like in any case, yeah. It seemed to be the thing about the me using YouTube as a music video portfolio. Standards that I chose as a preference as a drummer, predominantly and originating more so on the hard progressive hard rock side. I like covering it all though, like with my original music. I'm going to get beyond, what some drummers. I'm one of them that call it like sequencing. It doesn't really start the same or end the same. And Mike Portnoy has his own style about it, and Mike Mangini are the two predominant ones that's automatic. Neil Peart is similar, close to sequencing, but the thing about sequencing is that it normally doesn't repeat itself. Um, Even recognizing any similarity of it repeating itself and always the norm perception. I mean, it's like really advanced progressive. Neil Peart, as far as Peart, the band arrested drummer. I mean, like way back in 1979, this being the year 2024, was predominantly the most complex drummer that I really liked. Of the moving pictures compact disc, obviously originated a little bit from the permanent waves about that, and here recently it seemed to be the big deal, about the moving pictures. Um, Compact disc with the camera eye seemed to be the thing that, like, well, right now about a picture is a picture. In any case, yeah, I think about that because of certain factors of legal media and deposition and auditing and in a different manner of um, you know what that seemed to be. I mean, if it's going to be an issue of like programming, um, or constitutional law suggesting that being led to believe based upon participation, um, who's citing, who's dictating, or providing presentation in a way. Um, I mean, obviously, if some idea of annotation is resulting as participation, or if some idea of like a um, legal media and deposition only being the thought of like whether or not if auditing legal media and deposition would only be the thought and perception of only an access easement, um, in a way, or methods that would suggest maybe uh, doesn't really litigation is normally a corporate term. Most people's perception, and believe me, it's not really mine because I've studied corporate law, but litigation presents the issue more so of de facto, and it's not always a result of settlement. Um, I mean, corporate law, I mean, it's so much about the annuity and not really affected by any issue, truthfully, that de facto represents as like vantage. Um, it's there. Uh, Whether litigation and de facto is going to be the idea of a writ of habeas corpus, um, or not really substantial based upon only a non-degreed issue of how third person or like an easement of like intellectual property would be used in the form of maybe what a royalty only would present, maybe not so maybe thought of as a settlement. Most people's perception of litigation is maybe corporate law. But the thing about de facto seems to be that whether or not if it's going to be an issue like limitations, and truthfully, I mean, it can be that, and truthfully not that at all. Or you know what, like the Buick Century. I mean, it seems to be like really ultimately, an entire lifespan of some idea of what all is involved with the Roosevelt New Deal Act. It seems to be like really it ultimately seems to be getting to like the International Electronic Engineering and what is now TXU Energy, TXU like Texas utilities or Texas New Mexico power or Centerpoint Energy, reflecting some idea that knowing the difference between although Mexico is 69, this is Texas, okay. The thing is 69 likewise in addition, and compared to like some idea of like a religious thing of Jehovah's Witnesses in the way, and some idea of the Book of the Secret Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and some idea of like the history of the U.S. dollar below the equator in Latin America. And the thing it is that ultimately it gets to what the deal is as whether an academic level is some idea, a thought, or what participation may have been the perception of knowledge or willingness or knowingness, or not necessarily the case, based upon what audience is defined by, and what is all involved. I mean, if there's any, I've heard it as an idea like you are who you associate with, and in a sense, that's not necessarily always true. And that's the thing about litigation and de facto, and that's really what de facto is, more so than people might really acknowledge, or some idea of what limitations would only present maybe as not necessarily a forfeiture, or the thought of advantage being the suggestion of whether an inequality or equality is only the thought of an equal sign or a minus sign, or like the algebraic test of inversion applied to the equal sign being does not equal, and including alphanumeric and linguistic that way, or just a simple thought of alphanumerics, with a simple subtraction sign, like suggesting, after all that, you're trying to, is someone trying to say that, hey, there's not supposed to be a minus sign in alphanumerics. Like what's going on with 177 minus 26 is 151. And, like Secret Service, Holy Spirit, and like Jesus Christ, okay, all that stuff about like a federal issue with like a telepathic CP. But yeah, so I mean, it seemed to be like really ultimately that getting amphibious in the way, and the thing with this, it seemed to be like really the minus sign, like in the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia. I mean, there's only 2 words. I mean, I looked everywhere because, like, when I really started getting serious about alphanumerics in the beginning, I mean, really in the beginning, I didn't even know it was called alphanumerics. Although I knew A1 steak sauce was like A1, and like, I didn't even any kind of real perception of it being alphanumerics. I mean, that's real simple, and really not simple at all. I mean, there's so much available information. It's like, and actually, what seemed to be ultimately, after years of like alphanumerics and linguistics, getting to, the largest scale, and some idea of like heaven on this planet. Although it seemed to be like some idea of like a distinguishable difference of what only a method of banking would only suggest, whether an idea of participation would only be the thought of whether if managing factors which a preliminary prejudice. I mean, if a preliminary prejudice might be the thought of like the distinguishable difference between the stork or business and corporate law, and what the thought is about some idea of a preliminary prejudice of product registration of a birth certificate. Okay, the thing of this, it seems to be like that PG-13 and a W-2 seem to be almost like the front lines of the beach, right? And you've heard it before, probably the carbon footprint. And carbon, normally presents, an impression of purple as carbon as like some idea of like traced. Sometimes with the older models of typewriters, carbon paper's like I'm in the thing for like making a quick copy, while typing in progress. What is now some idea of like not always true, but the word simulcast, and not necessarily that. And likewise, in addition with like iPhones and certain of the later models of phones mirroring, in combination either by a mobile hotspot on the phone and like mirroring exactly what's on like the mobile phone onto the television or laptop that way, either by cable or wireless means. But in any case, yeah. So like all that carbon paper seemed to be like the front lines of the beach ride. Ultimately getting to a color code, and it seemed to be the significance of like California being purple in '88 and Oldsmobile Delta '88. And my thought of a preliminary prejudice of product registration of a birth certificate, and ultimately it seems to be like whether or not if the thing about it is the idea of the carbon footprint on the front lines of the beach, right? And ultimately, two people off on the front lines of the beach, right? Then there's just one set of footprints and a question. I mean, that's all it's showing is footprints. And Lord, where were you when I needed? It's like, well, that's when I was carrying you. But in a sense, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thought of like whether or not a preliminary prejudice is the only thought of knowing or not knowing, some idea of purple and a carbon footprint would be representative of don't be fooled by imitations. So what's really the imitation? I mean, if California's the purple thing about for Purple Mountain's majesties above the fruited plain, so which footprint is the carbon footprint? The one that's not showing? Or is it the imagination being like something of a Houston in 112? Or the thought of a mirage in the desert, and the idea of an oasis of love is, yeah, or some idea of contra and infra, and what a fair is to being amphibious. Some idea of like visualization in a way, some idea of some connectivity in the direction. You've heard it before. I think therefore I am, and the thing of it is that some idea of like a alphanumeric involving the alphanumerics of 177 minus 26 being 151, U151, and like Holy Spirit, Sacred Church, Jesus Christ, and telepathy minus God, and subliminal message minus 26 thing, all on through the list. God, game, card, lie, dog, and I mean gotta be kidding me. Sometimes the thing about 177 in mental telepathy is not, when the deal gets to the amphibious part, it seemed to be, the big deal about, for Purple Mountain's majesty above the fruited plain, beyond the toilet of the white porcelain, and the high silver thing about, the oldest governmental computer mainframe, and being amphibious that way, like, what Toucan Sam is to Fruit Loops. And the thing of it is that, I mean, it's like a color code, yet it's the bird. Toucan Sam, might represent some idea below the equator of like, like a South American thing, or, some idea, what seemed to be like Latin Urban League, or like constitutional law identifying, an 80s band, identifying like, the band we're at, the rock band, or ratifying and codifying being some idea of what, maybe I have really been, thoroughly naive about networking in a way, yet at the same time, that's just kind of like, some idea of like a, not necessarily the mistletoe or surface to air, that would, be some, idea, beyond a holiday season, and not pending, some idea of, designated or, thought of like the everyday thing instead of like the designated, almost like the designated driver of the Mississippi River as compared to the driver, and, the driver on a golf course, is predominantly, the first hardest, point at the longest distance, using the driver. Okay, the thing it is about the province in that way, it seems to be like the issue of whether or not if a PG-13 rating is going to reflect anything of presidential governors, more so of like, the 9-hole golf courses, maybe having a direct contact of presidential governors as like some idea of like parental guidance as a PG-13, or some idea that maybe would go beyond maybe the thought of, if it's really even going to matter, only based upon, what the ERISA statute and the IRA seems to be an idea of what the difference between like non-taxable income or annuity, or some idea of like prepaid tax of an IRA, and whether or not if an IRA has ever been designated as a prepaid tax, that, prepaid taxes always like, part of the conversation normally of employment anyway, whether an IRA has been designated, or not, or even, thought of and went beyond, some idea of checking a little box, or some idea of like managing factors. And the thing of it is about the ERISA statute seemed to be, the one movie that's not about the bond or some idea that would maybe go beyond the thought of maybe just some idea involving real estate. And the word escrow. I mean, it seemed to be, like my question being like of escrow, like did it originate from a religious venue? It is the alphanumeric 78, like a heart guide. And what the heartbeat of America in today's Chevrolet seemed to be, in the way of like AOL, and certain factors involving, and I'll think about it later and come back to it later. But the thing is that all this information about being amphibious, it ultimately got to, going beyond liquid activity, like make it great beyond Internet Protocol, local area network, or maritime law, getting amphibious beyond the towing, and amphibious, above it, some idea of the Holy Land. The thing is that it's ultimately gotten to like certain factors of like going through a circuit and involving the thought of the StarGate program, and really the first 4.5 years, really truthfully, even after a 10-year period that had went on, close to 15 years, and beyond that, I mean, really for about the last, 6 years, five or 6 years, I've been thoroughly, identifying, a lot of factors that seem to be that Advances Love 30 is some idea of what memory is going through the StarGate program, and I'm almost for certain that an eternal treasure of the military already knows that some of the things about like StarGate program is going to be, an experience that really might take, up to, 30 year, close to 30 years of like rejuvenating some kind of idea of memory based upon everything that's involved, who's involved, when and where, or, and, some of that's like kind of like going on with like my memory, and the thing about, memory minus de facto is like 35, okay? And like Austin, being I-35 and, human capital, what human capital is in a way of investment terminology, that way of like international banking systems, as well as like the thought of investments firm beyond the thought of like a normal method of banking as compared to, the New York Stock Exchange, or what a stock exchange would only mean to raising a bar. And it seemed to be the thing about GMC, raising a bar, it goes beyond the thought of like a, Flag Day, or, the Senior Monument, or the thought of like, between octave scales, between the baritone to the tenor, and a little bit of similarities, a little bit of humor, like what the heck you're looking at right now, like the Diners Club air traffic, and like, I know that sounds good, and I have another hat that has Diners Club air traffic with like similarities in tempo and notation. And the thing of it is about the hat, and you've seen it previously with like this hat, except it has Diners Club air traffic with similarities in tempo and notation, is that it seemed to be the bar, raising the bar, okay, between the baritone and the tenor, and what octave scale is, in that way of manufacturers of what the bar is as compared to spectrum and bandwidth, or the Flag Day of like Six Flags, and other factors involving whether or not the solid state is going to be the issue of categorization of like bandwidth and spectrum, and potentiometer presenting some factors. But anyway, it's like it gets amphibious in a way of being above the thought of like but why when you are walking on rice paper, and it presents all that as some idea of like designating within description of participation. Okay, I mean, and really knowing or not knowing, it seems to be the issue of whether or not what's been here recently, predominantly my thought of more so of a preliminary prejudice. I mean, ultimately, if it's getting to anatomy and some similarity of what relation, I mean, the word is relation between architecture and platform. Or, really, I mean, ultimately, if it's getting to the equator and the opera, I mean, really, what is the preliminary prejudice? I mean, is it the relation, or is it really the thought of immigration's custom enforcement having use of international law of access easement that normally presents intellectual property in the form of royalties, as compared to maybe some thought of like similarity of what royalty would only mean as a prepaid tax on an IRA as compared to non-taxable income of benefits like such as supplemental security, likewise, SNAP food benefits and a Lone Star card, some idea of electronic benefits transfer, the EBT, and something about even my drum set, like being a double bass with like two toms on each side, almost like the four tom being like a hypothetical metaphor. You had a pi r squared being a bass and two toms, squared being like the deal about six, and the thing about alphanumerics of six, okay, it seemed to be so presidential of Six Flags and the national anthem in that way. It seemed to be the big deal about, the alphanumeric 52, 6 being what the SIX, and that's what 28, 48, 49, 50, 51. It's like 52, okay, like a VPN, a vice president network, or be a plenipotentiary network, or the alphanumeric, the heart, the pearl, and hey, I have a Pearl Vision VSX, yeah, I'm going to get all of it straight of blue, and I'm in a transition because like something's really kind of like not cool about the situation. And at the same time, it seemed to be that the Pearl Vision, like getting back to it, like I don't even think it was available in the United States when I went through the first 4.5 years, back during, give or take, 2 years from 1995, because ultimately, going through it and hearing for the first time about the World Trade Center 9/11 in the year 2001, and there was like certain factors. I mean, 10, 15 years later, I'm talking to my dad. So it's like you wrote. I was saying, hey, it seemed like television and radio, newspaper, anything with a timestamp. I mean, going through some of the parts about the Stargate program that I didn't even consider the Stargate program at the time. Seemed to be, the most intense part about what memory minus factor only means to, I-35 and Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet Paralegal, and HTTP : // or the thought of, the Swiss Klondike bar compared to the hockey puck, and the similarity to the colon, and, the wise one, you are walking on rice paper, and, the deal about hockey and a hockey stick, and the double force class being like 22.5, it's automatically in my mind 22.5 degree angle. Yet the hockey stick, it depends on how you're looking at it. I mean, if it's really a 135 degree, only because of which direction it's facing, as a point of origin, as compared to 135 divided by 22.5 is 6. Okay, and all that VPN stuff about vice president network and presidential levels of the today's Chevrolet and the heartbeat of America, as compared to some idea of like Six Flags, and some idea of the New Deal Act between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt being like 6 presidential terms, and ABC 13 Houston all the way to ABC 7 like Los Angeles, a difference of 6. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about the alphanumeric that way. But the thing of it is, it seemed that ultimately it had gotten to parts of realizing that certain locations that was taken to during the Stargate program, quite a bit was going on. Before I'd like really even realize certain factors about it, but it was like really intense, predominantly for the first 3 years, really. And like going on like when I was asleep, okay? And, like various places like around the entire world. For it seemed to be about a 6-month period that I almost first certain had to be somewhere around 6, maybe 9-month period. But anyway, taking different locations, it seemed to involve like, certain locations involving, factors of television, music videos, and certain other factors of location. In any case, it had gotten to, not even realizing it and watching it. And the same thing about my Pearl Vision drum set, okay? Because, like, I was brought back to my home, and the furniture had been changed. The drum set was there that I have now that you see me on YouTube.com at WadeASVPriddy, P-R-I-D-D-Y, at YouTube.com. Okay, and that drum set was in my home. I didn't even know I was in my own home. The furniture had been changed. The drum set was like that you see now. Believe me, it was like around like a 1995, 93, 94, 95, and some of the hardest, intense part about it, I mean, while I'm asleep. Well, anyway, it's like I didn't even know I was in my own home. It's like I'm waking up, and even the scanning light, it's like it's a moving head, but it's like 4 different colors on each side. It rotates at virtually like 180. And I actually placed it, and I mean the same exact place. Bought the same furniture. Can you believe it? I mean, the availability, all this economic stuff of, being on SSI and realizing how really controlled based upon, some idea of a personality profile, and realizing something about, I picked the same exact furniture, put it in virtually the same exact location, and the light and you'll see it on YouTube.com, the big mirror. Actually placed it in the same place vertically, and bought the drum set, okay? But I bought it as a 5-piece set, okay? I mean, when I saw it, I mean, like I was going to get it. I mean, anyway, it's like the coolest one I've seen. I would have got the strap blue, but it just wasn't available with the, the black coating that when drum heads and drum rims and hardware, it's only flash that they present it, and there's other issues about like what's going on when I leave my home, okay, and coming back, and that all of a sudden it's kind of like I thought I had chrome, okay, not just flashing, okay, but the salt and sweat presents the issue that affects the surface of like more so of flashed what's supposed to be thorough thick plated chrome, okay. Well, anyway, so like it was black coating of polyurethane on the drum set that you see me on now at WadeASVPriddy, PRDY at YouTube.com, and that's why I got the Strata Red. But I'm working on getting the complete set and the Strata Blue. But in any case, okay, I mean, like the drum set was in here, and like I'm waking up in my home on a sofa in the middle of the night, and there's not any light on except that one moving head light with 4 different colors on each side, vertically moving real slow because it's like quiet. It's like scanning. I mean, extremely slow. And I'm waking up. I'm not even realizing I'm even in my home. Just looking right at the drum set and just wasn't quite computing that it was even a drum set. Although I knew the light was like scanning. It's kind of like, where am I at, And I'm looking at it and the light just stops right on me. And even the curtains on our window, even my room had been remodeled based upon placing an air conditioner in a window that had been broken and covered up with plywood. And I even did that. I mean, exactly the way it was, and brought back in my home. I didn't remember, not anything about it. I mean, the furniture, the drum set, even putting, and like years later, I mean, it's like with everything involved, I'm so almost guaranteed for sure that in economics, demographics, and everything like that, I'm being so like thought of as something controlled. Being impressed would be almost like not experiencing it, yet upset like to the fact, like sometimes like even making a decision on my own almost became as insulting as impressive. Not funny at all, really. The thing is that even that, and I'm in my room, 15, 20 years later, realizing I'm looking at, what was almost my thought of, you've heard it before in political science and economics and demographics, projected estimate obstinate future, normally involving some idea of the New York Stock Exchange, okay? And the thing with this is that, anyway, I was like in there, and I'm looking at the drum set, and it was like 45 minutes, okay? And how long I was here, I'm not real sure. Even this tent was like a white line the first time. It's hard to believe. I had a pop-up in here because the condition of the EPA was like some idea of like weather conditions inside the home, okay? And like I had 10,000 watts of power and all kinds of stuff and all the things, going on about, feeling the perception of like, getting charged in midair, like, hey, I bought a Rush compact disc, okay? Well, anyway, okay. Certain factors about that, and it's kind of like what's going on now. It's like on YouTube, and all this is going on, resulting in some idea, like, what's the deal about, going on with like the Environmental Protection Agency or the EPA being some idea of Electronic Power of America and conditions that presented, the idea of like VIX Formula 44 and Acura. It's kind of like, you gotta be kidding me. And like I'm still in this tent now, but the thing is that I had a pop-up stand in here. Really, well, like, where am I going to go with that kind of stuff, the light going on? Really, I already know. So, I'm on SSI, okay? The thing is that I'm still in the tent. This has been going on for like three years, and out of the hospital, okay? Over some idea of like, in the area, apparently, there for a while, it seemed to be like a bunch of identical twins switching out between veterinarians and like doctors treating people like you're in a veterinarian's office at a regular hospital and in a freaking doctor's office, and have an identical twin brother as a veterinarian treating people and prescribing veterinarian medication in the pharmacy. Really, it's not, cool at all. And believe me, knowing it's so not cool that I kind of, had some American Express thoughts about it, okay? So anyway, in any case, so like that's like really not cool, or, the humor might be a little bit about, Robert Half or some, white collar executive, beyond the ballpark ranks, and the humor, as American as hot dogs and apple pie. And my thought, the Robert Half thing about, some idea of like the white collar executive in a way, ultimately getting to the Corvette, and, the thought of the telekinetic roll of the pen there seemed to be so much more so people's perception of, what they may have seen, some idea of like a telekinetic, suggesting some idea of mind power or like mental telepathy, gives the impression of like a pen rolling on a table. Not some idea of, you know, some idea of paraphernalia, okay? The thing it is that really, people may get into the thought of 56 is 10, or what annotation is, in the way of annotated being 94, or adoption or abortion, some idea of telekinetic roll the pen as a hood ornament, or, some premeditated, NNA dancer, masturbator in the soft flats, okay? Or some pagan idolatry that's identified, some idea of like, League of Media in the form of like battleship, and some pagan idolatry in the red color code, or, some like idea like the Yul Brynner and like Moses, okay? Carrying like the golden staff, okay? And having some idea about the 10 Commandments, okay? And the deal about escrow is kind of like, in certain parts about anatomy, okay? And how true it is, I haven't really ever heard, not anyone in religion or in identifying escrow or any connectivity of pagan idolatry involving, some idea of like a product registration, preliminary purchase product registration of a birth certificate, or what Babylon means, the Paraland. An entire life in diapers and what? You're looking for a relationship, huh? Or some idea of like anatomy in a way of like a controlled what? Uncontrolled what? You gotta be kidding me. In any case, so like, here's the thing about, some idea about, the real thing about it. And I've actually tried to actually find out and look for, some similarities between escrow, in the form of like a preliminary prejudice, a product registration of a birth certificate, like at the front lines of the beachfront, or what a carbon footprint is, of carbon being purple, in the way of being, 88 in California, or the New Deal Act of, between the idea, it's presented in the latter part, between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt. Now I'll actually have to think which one it is. It's in the book, Secrets of the Empire, Photos That Runs the Country, but how true it is only seems to be really, the real issue of McDonald's Golden Arches, presenting a degree level of reference standards of consensual participation in one way above the equator, as compared to what would only be the idea below the equator, being some idea of the latitude, and need to be in a 90-degree right angle, presenting some idea of like access as a direct circuit in military time, as compared to some idea of maybe what parameters only would mean to absolute values as a vertical going through algebra and calculus on into quantum, yet presented in a religious way as some absolute at a 90 degree, would be, progression of ascending would be like a period of like the Israeli flag presenting, parameters that would be normally involving waveform in post-production, like customizing waveform. And what waveform really is in the United States Supreme Court, as far as legal media and deposition of the waveform of the actual court reporter in the real courtroom, not necessarily a typewriter, but it's, symbolic in the way of waveform of a real court reporter. In any case, yeah, so like the same is with the audio production in waveform, as far as attenuation goes and digital signal processing speed. Normally the 4 increments of like 24, 48, 72, and 96 on, customizing waveform, and how integrated or interchangeable or customized it can get, I guess, based upon a preset of an option of automation, choosing what automation would only mean in digital signal processing speed involving attenuation would, and if there's any combined as a standard feature as compared to customizing, any thought of integrating or what compatibility would only mean as compared to a degree level of reference standards of consensual participation, instead of the idea of like only what situation would only present maybe as integration, not necessarily an option, but it happens type of integration. And I'm not real sure if the standard featured is like core curriculum that way, with like digital signal processing involving customizing waveform between the 24, 48, 72, and 96 increments and what's all involved with it. Okay, but anyway, that seems to have some significance in my mind that way, the waveform. But anyway, yeah, so like, think about certain factors, and I'm going off into a broad range. It's already going on close to 35 minutes right here. But anyway, yeah. So like I was thinking about the thing about the transponder, okay? Because the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Communications Commission, the FAA and FCC combined with like AAA, and I thought of some idea like the American Idol. Beyond, what towing would only mean, and in maritime law, what would taxiing be like, on the runway, or some idea of like leading the way, like an escort would be in the way of like a taxiing on the runway, or porting as towing. And I see that in my mind, or what AAA would only mean to some idea of like all the information is being provided. With some idea of like Ulysses S. Grant being the name itself, what would maybe be some idea of presidential debate in the form of, where pros and cons going to be some idea, between a libertarian as compared to a Republican or Democrat, or some idea of libertarian would only present the idea of maybe what only Vantage would only mean to Love 30. But it seemed to be the deal about, Vantage Love 30 seemed to be the idea of like Ulysses S. Grant in a way. It seems so different between Utah and some idea, memory minus the fact of being 35, and Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet, Paralegal, and HTTP, : and the thing about certain factors that way. But yeah, I was thinking about that because some idea of like being all amphibious, and something about the World Trade Center in certain locations that was like involved. Seemed to be like the black box, it identifies, it's like world news and national news all the time about like when there's a plane crash, they look for the black box. Or even in maritime law, and there's certain factors about a location, and how true it is that it seems to be the thing about the transponder and the black box, and being a whole different perception of the black box, or like instead of the black box, like who's in the black box. The thing with this is that Abraham Lincoln night vision seemed to be the thing about measuring the density of light in nanounits of luminance. Or what the hood ornament is of the Lincoln Continental, presenting the front lines of the beachfront of the one and only rectangle. It seems to have the significance of the vertical of like, the Japanese structure in quantum of, I believe there's only 22 letters. I mean, it looks all symbolic to me. I don't really read Japanese, although I think I might know it when I see it, just for knowing that it's like vertical, okay, from top to bottom. And the only thing I've ever known, based upon available information, that there's only 22 alphabetical letters in the Japanese alphabet, and how true that is, really. I guess when I just have to know, maybe I will know. Believing everything I've ever seen and heard on networking, this is proven to be like, a degree level or a non-degree level, or in an entire world of like, programming and the way information is distributed, or what degree level ripple center consensual participation would only mean in one way the McDonald's Golden Arches as compared to some idea in my mind of the equator, the one and only latitude, the operator in Chevrolet, or the zero thing about, HTTP : and computer programming and language of the one-word relation. Or the thought that something of embedding encryption would only be maybe the non-degreed issue of, what would only be some idea of some symbolic representation of 1 cycle per second of half cycle above and half cycle below, and the now thing of a degree level of representative consensual participation looking like the symbolic schematic, electronic fish that many Christians actually use as a symbolic representation to represent, the Christianity thing about, and hopefully gets to the Calamity Jane thing, the prepaid postage in the pearl, the clam, and the river and swimming upstream, and what the pearl is, to Calamity Jane and prepaid postage that way. And, the fish swimming upstream like the biggest mouth of the river, like once again, in Mississippi, the delta being, the schematic triangle, and, the thing about it being squared and pi squared, and, the 6-point star, and, beyond the pyramid on the backside of the US $1. But anyway, yeah, so like there was like a location about that. What I was telling my dad, it seemed to be like, it convinced me that the World Trade Center happened in the year 2001 just really wouldn't really convince me, considering a lot of things that was going on during, 1994, 95, and 96, and it seemed to be quite a bit about, almost like the deal about, Papermate being 5610 in 94, based upon pronunciation and spelling combined, and the thing about what would represent, some idea of whether or not a litigation de facto and writ habeas corpus would only be the idea of Roe v. Wade, or adoption or abortion, both being 94, likewise annotated, or some idea of that papermate would only reflect a combination of pronunciation, and based upon pronunciation it's spelling, combined with the norm of 56 is 10, papermate, being that alphanumerically paper being 56, and mate being, being the thought of 39 spelled out, 56 is 10, being T and 39, but the pronunciation being the number itself being 10, 56 is 10 being 94. And that's why I study alphanumeric linguistics, and, some idea of like auditing, legal media, and deposition, and, available information that way, and how I arrive at the Roe v. Wade thing about, the front lines of the Detroit and the carbon footprint. And what the carbon footprint is, the license plate as compared to, the VIN number, and what province in that way of color code of the VIN number as compared to the license plate. Or what citizenship really only is based upon whether or not if a PG-13 of a W-2 form is only the idea of whether or not a preliminary practice of product registration of birth certificate is, going to be identified. I mean, is it optional and or a known or not known fact of a carbon footprint representing the front lines of the beach ride? And the question, well, Lord, is it that, Eddie Murphy's like on the front lines of the beach ride in the movie Trading Places, or like, Lord, where were you when I need you most? It's kind of like, it was like, how to warm my horseshoes to the ice face, and, realize, don't be fooled by imitations because of the carbon footprint. Maybe I might have thought of things in a different manner. But in any case, so it seemed to be like really, ultimately, the Roosevelt New Deal Act between the Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt had ultimately got to the idea of a degree level representative consensual participation as compared to a non-degreed issue of non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, termed in, some idea of what was then like processing of the finder's fees of like homes that had actually paid insurance and not had one claim, defined as, I had the right to reimbursement of premiums paid on homeowners insurance that was never used in the form of like FHA HUD loans on, the principal, like not a mortgage. People's perception of mortgage might not be the single difference of the Bureau of Vital Statistics, or some idea of like, are you on the front lines of the beach, or someone like, playing the idea of like the New Deal Act as compared to what TXU Energy may have thoroughly been and still is to this very day, deciding whether or not if Texas is equaling 69 in Mexico or New Mexico. I mean, it's like the McDonald's Golden Arches being degree level representatives of consensual participation side by side, like Texas and New Mexico. Yet, the idea of the equator below the equator being Mexico, in the same way, in native like a 9 degree of the equator, and some like now thing about the cycle per second oscillation, measuring frequency that way, and having like access in a way beyond the dimensional clause of maritime law into some amphibious idea of like a Federal Aviation Commission, and some idea that Mexico is not necessarily Texas or the United States. Yet the alphanumerics of 69 go beyond Mexico below the equator into some idea the history of the U.S. dollar defined as legal terminology in Latin America. Yet defined in a book, The Secret of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, like a religious issue, more so than legal terminology, but presenting whether or not if all that is ultimately getting to the biggest thing about an entire century of an eternal treasury and a Stargate program, and what 1964 seemed to be. It seemed to be that it's ultimately gotten to some idea of getting to that point of who's amphibious and where's the carbon footprint. Don't be fooled by imitations, huh? I mean, if it's like for Purple Mountain's majesty and intellectual property in the way of an easement, first, second, or third person, or some idea of whether or not if participation is only significance within range, or what royalties is based upon not necessarily infringement, or some idea of like a registered charity as compared to a certificate of deposit, or some idea maybe beyond a checking account, prepaid postage that would maybe present something other than maybe an entire lifetime, realizing a little bit more on the annuity side, or some idea like the freedom of speech and freedom of press is some idea that might be only the thought of having fair use of intellectual property or an easement, that might be some idea like, an appraisal, of personality in person as compared to maybe real estate itself. Yet the Holy Temple is a Holy Temple, yet in corporate law, the entity is identified as an eternal structure, yet at the same time, corporate law, representing, the alphabetics of 144, and what the 144,000 is, the 12 tribes of Israel, and why 3 zeros is significant as compared to the thought of like 3 O's being 15 3 times is like 45, and 0 being 64, and maybe the thought of Mercedes-Benz in my mind of celestial, I have to think of the other one. The Mormons really stress the celestial and telestial thing, but it seemed to be the pastel colors involving the close encounters of the third kind, and what a plateau is in that way of communication of pastel colors of the thought of like Technicolor. If the movie identifies it like intellectual property, it's like third person, almost like an alien is the USA. USA being alphabetics of 41, or alien, or home. You gotta be kidding me. I mean, those seem to be the three of litigation, tobacco, and res habeas corpus. What programming only means, and who knows anyway for him? Like what for him? Who knows what? Who knows anyway? Who knows anyway for him? What for him? A PT-13? W-2? Or PT-13 in the form of presidential governors? Or deciding if the PTA is just only having a decision of having a right to assemble, just decide what they're going to watch on TV, as compared to maybe parental guidance that might have direct, sources of what management might only mean, as some idea of like, same difference between what a shareholder only might mean to an entire neighborhood, or even, 9-hole golf course, or the thought of maybe not necessarily a direct source, or what international law of like intellectual property only means, as the thought of like only what duration means of lifespan, or vice versa. Don't be fooled by imitations, but is it a carbon footprint on the front lines of the beach, right? Or is it just parental guidance, or some idea of like knowing or not knowing, who knows anyway for him, and locally, whether or not if they reach the statute or some idea of the one James Bond movie, it's not about the bond. Although it presents, the thought of like the price of gold going up and down, and the thing about the certain factors of gold blonde, although James Bond, my thought of like the Fort Stockton, Texas, Ector Sector, the guitar, okay, it seemed to be the thing about Sector and Ector County of like Guitar Airlines, being some thought of like Line 6 B series, and shows about 909 of the impedance and ambience with the 13-band graphic equalizer of like night vision, yet at the same time, Mork from Mork being, Robin Williams, and Mork and Mindy being the Bicentennial Man, and filmed at the Oracle Corporation, okay, in Redwood, California. And all the 88 stuff about New Deal Act, and the thing about it is that Oracle identified as the Big O. I mean, it is the Big O, the basketball arenas, the Oracle, I think it's an arena. I'm not sure if it's considered a stadium or a center, but it's like the Oracle, where the basketball team actually, the Big O thing about it. And like the Apple Corporation is like the Big O thing as well. And what Oracle is, and database administration of acronyms, likewise, like free enterprise management as compared to maybe the thought of like business intelligence, database administration as compared to some idea of middleware and firmware, and some idea of like Cybele as compared to some firmware that might go off into some other areas that, it's like I've been looking in quite a bit of that and going on my memory, completely right now. In any case, yeah, so like anyway, yeah, so like there was like a location of a movie, it's identified as like Cairo, and how true it is, and I'm almost assuming, why wouldn't it be, but it seemed to be like some idea of the black box, some idea of like after a plane crash, that they look for the black box. And, thought about memories, like, I'm like, but watching YouTube, and a lot of things have been going on, and realizing that some of the videos that I've been watching, there was actual places that I was, like, really taken to, and, like, not even remembering quite a bit of some of the things that were going on. But the thing of it is that here recently, it's kind of like the black, it seems about the World Trade Center, like, going through the circuit, was like, while I was going through the circuit, and realizing something about the midnight blue identified on Air Force One, President of the United States, even finding it. I mean, I don't think it's just like readily available for the United States, other than possibly, what the acronym of the FBI only means to Federal Bureau of Investigation as compared to Foreign Business, Foreign Bureau Intelligence or Interrogation, or Family Business Intelligence, and the acronym of the FBI presenting, the Midnight Blue in the way of a Foreign Bureau interrogation, going through the Stargate program of the Midnight Blue and the PASO, the 1040 EZ form, and some idea like the recent statute being a black color code of like, warehousing in like Texas state statutes annotated, not limited to Texas, state statutes annotated constitutional law in the black books, are the one and only like jurisprudence, and like the spreading is compared to the golf course of province of Pastel Green and the book in the law library and jurisprudence with the one the black back, and involving like obviously repudiation is the thing about it, and all the thought of some idea of like a grander tenor, raising the bar between the baritone and the tenor, and what all that is in solid state, and in a way of like what jurisprudence only means to repudiation, or what that is in annotation in the classroom, or before, during, and after the class, or in any case, so like all that was like going on, and watching quite a bit with more and more places, and the memory coming back. I mean, after like 25-30 year period, and it's kind of like something I'd focus on, because I was thinking that the transponder issue is like a predominantly that period, the World Trade Center. I was telling my dad, I said, I don't think anyone can convince me that the World Trade Center was even in 2001, because quite a bit, and I had no conception of, the World Trade Center being any connectivity of going through a circuit. And it seemed to be like something about that, and parallel being 140 in alphanumerics, and Highway 59, and attenuation, and quite a bit, about, FBI psychology minus RCA, and the 22 thing of the FDIC, and ultimately getting to, the quantum issue of like reading Japanese from top to bottom, identified as only, Japanese having only 22 alphabetical letters, and ultimately getting to the quantum of the only 2 Japanese structures involving the different by design E and the absolute values going through, all the way through calculus into quantum, but doesn't have the structure that quantum does until it gets to quantum. Okay, so anyway, yeah, so like it's going on 52 minutes right now. I was kind of like thinking about that because of some idea I've been really focusing on the American Idol about the 800 RPM as compared to the amphibious thing, beyond the front lines of the beachfront in maritime law of internet protocol and local area networking in that way, and making grade beyond that, and saying about the the international electronic engineering involving 240 volt as like a minimum requirement of like the commercial venue of living quarters, and it's not the question of degree level reputable standards as compared to the McDonald's Golden Arches is some idea below the equator, some idea of like the operator involving the fish swimming upstream of like what one schematic symbolic representation of one cycle half above and below only is in the now thing of equality, being degree level representation considered participation in that way only because of a 90 degree of the one and only latitude involving 0 degree in computer programming and language and operator, and like even YouTube at this point, what legal media and deposition only means, like as far as I'm concerned. And like, hi, my name is Wade. Okay, I'm a drummer, singer, and like I always do it anyway. But yeah, there's been a lot going on, and I kind of been thinking about it, and I'm not really sure if it's like the smartest thing to do about. I mean, the thought of like counterbalancing or for perfected signal changes is the idea of like, is it the thing to do? I mean, not saying anything about it would be ridiculously like nothing's happening, or the memory being the biggest part about the Stargate program. I mean, it's been that long. That we're, in any case, so like anyway, there it is. It's like so remembering something about that, and some idea of like a location, and the Alpha 73, Egypt, and Harris, and Israel, and being Israeli, like one person in Brazoria being like 90, or the one person representing a Colombian in the DC thing. I've never really truthfully ever claimed to be a Colombian, just because, I've been in a bank in the state of Texas, okay? The thing with this is that, I mean, ultimately, you know, the thing about Washington being 130 and television and electronic God, or, you know, a telepathic thing about, you know, advances above 30 and, you know, telepathic 30, a 30 telepathic thing, you know, the idea of like a dimensional clause is DC or direct circuit, um, seem to be, you know, the deal about, you know, McDonald's golden arches in the schematic fish and swimming upstream of a 9 degree, the equator and operator that way. But anyway, yeah, so like I'm gonna kind of take a break. It's already going on already, close to an hour. It's like 55 minutes and like 25 seconds now. So there it is, okay?